I'm Joseph.
And I'm Nick.
And this is Fish Jelly. Good morning.
Good morning.
The previous podcasts we recorded Saturday night. So this is the first time doing it on Sunday morning. Last night was rough for me because I drank a little bit too much.
You got so excited.
We had a Zoom call with friends and yeah. We were only on the call for like an hour.
It was longer.
Was it longer? Yeah, and I had too much to drink, so I went to bed very early. Well, not early for me, but
Right.
earlier than I would have liked. How are you feeling?
Good. Hopeful
About what?
that LA's gonna open up soon.
Okay. Well, do we want to start with Drag Race Down Under?
Sure. Let's start on an unenthusiastic note.
Yeah, still not impressed. So, this past week, who went home? See, I don't even... The only thing remarkable to me about the most recent episode is that the contestant, etc., etc.
She went home.
Oh, wait, who's the one who did blackface?
The one whose name was Scarlett something. Adams?
Scarlett Johansson? No,
Scarjo.
ScarJo. Yeah, it came out... Well, it came out, like, in the beginning of the episode when, you know, the overly produced segments where the queens are getting ready.
Where you have Art Simone go, has anyone done anything in drag that they're ashamed of?
And as soon as...
Ding, ding, ding.
Yeah, as soon as he said it, I was like, someone did blackface.
But then as soon as he said that, I remember back when they first announced the cast of this, that was a hot topic. Although, at that time I didn't bother to care to look into it.
But yeah, so one of the contestants, Scarlett Adams, I believe, is her name, right?
That sounds right.
Anyway, yeah, she had done blackface previously.
Which sounds like an old Katharine Hepburn character.
And so when it was announced she was on the show, it popped up on social media, like images and videos of her doing it. So during the episode, she discusses it. And then, actually, etc., etc. is the one who tries to school her on it, who happens to be the one to go home. And then during the elimination process, RuPaul brings it up. Like, it's been brought to my attention, you've done this, would you like to explain yourself? She explains herself, and Ru says, I know people want me to cancel you, but I'm going to use this as an opportunity to show kindness, and maybe people can learn, and you can grow from this. So... that was that, but yeah, still not in love with the show or any of the contestants.
Well, it's funny for somebody that is facing that kind of a dilemma. He doesn't kind of go out of his way to seem like he's done anything different, or because he still seems unfriendly. And
okay, so my only thought is when people say like you have to atone, I just don't know like what he would need to do. Like this, drag performer when he was very young, like in his early 20s, did a character in blackface thinking it was funny. And then it's like he realized that it was wrong, probably because of the negative reaction he received. Like had he not received that reaction, he would probably still be doing it.
Well, that's the thing. I think your behavior changes and your attitude towards other changes when you learn to feel empathy for them.
Sure, but people, even etc., was saying like he needs to do something. But what does he need to do? Like give money to the NAACP
she said he needs to do more than just say he's sorry, which I agree with. But
what is that? Like people always say that, but it's like what is he supposed to do? Because it makes it sound like he needs to do something for black people.
I think it's a personal thing that he needs to figure out for himself. That is genuine and authentic, and I don't think there's a script for it.
I agree with you, but I think people act like they want to know. Like,
sure.
You need to explain to me what you did to atone for this thing you did I don't like. And I don't know. As a black person, I don't feel like I need that. Like, you recognize that what you did was stupid. You're not going to do it again.
Well, because anything innately that comes out of that has to be lip service because you're just answering a question. But I think it has to be a personal journey.
As a gay person, as a black person, I know there are a lot of people out there who may have negative thoughts towards someone like me, and maybe they have done and said things that they are now embarrassed for. And all I can ask for is that you stop doing it. But you donating money to, some LGBT like nonprofit, or that doesn't make me feel like you're a different person.
Agreed.
The only thing I would feel good knowing is that you know that you can't say that shit anymore, or you're going to get lit up. So stop saying it.
It's just what I think the point I'm trying to make is if you get clocked and learn your lesson and learn to thinking about changing your behavior and how you move about in the world. I think that what's supposed to happen is it affects how you deal with everyone else as well.
Yes, I agree with what you're saying, and I think that that's like real change.
Yes.
I'm talking about this fake ass, like, someone in the public eye did something a group of people don't like, and they issue an apology, and they donate their next paycheck to said group affiliated, and then it's supposed to be like, well, they did what they're supposed to do. And I just don't think, to me, that just seems fake. Like what you said, sort of personal growth and doing the work that makes you feel better and learning from what you've done. But how could we ever quantify that or qualify that? Like, we don't know people's true feelings. So
that's right, you can't.
So I just think it's so strange that people feel so comfortable saying, you need to atone. I don't know what that would be, but you need to do it. Well, shit, bitch. I mean, if you don't know what I need to do to make you feel better about what I did, then, like, what am I supposed to do? And do I even care? The other thing, too, is, like, here's this white queen telling another white queen how she's bothered by her doing blackface, and it's like, I don't know, y'all didn't have any black people on the show to even talk about. And then the one black person on the show, the host, is just kind of like...
Well, they had two.
They were people of color,
right?
Because they were indigenous. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure how to
the Aboriginal
people from New Zealand and Australia, but there were no black people. And what Scarlett did was blackface. Yes. So the one black person on the show, which is RuPaul, didn't really seem to have an opinion of what she did. She just said, "It's been brought to my attention. These photos have come up. Mm-hmm. Explain yourself, and I'm not going to kick you off." Which is her choice, it's her show. And I don't know that I wouldn't feel the same. Like, I would be like, well, it's wrong, so you can call me the N-word when you're at home and no one's filming you, but out in public you can. And, like, I have no control over that. I just found it funny that, like, this other white queen who seems to also be very, she identifies as trans, right? Et cetera, or yes. Non-binary.
Yeah.
But... she seems to be very, like, easily lit up about people's language and what they do and say. It just, I don't know. I don't care what this white lady thinks. Like, I don't care what this white lady thinks about what this white queen said about black people.
I think it helps that you didn't really care for et cetera's personality either. But I think, as grating as that is, I think it helps further a conversation.
Yes. The net result is positive that this thing was called out and how are we going to handle it. And
I think what was interesting out of that highly produced moment is you have this younger person as representative of, kind of a new woke generation. And then Maxie Shields as an older person who's kind of had put into her 2 cents of what things used to be like.
And her perspective was that coming from a particular community where certain language and certain views were considered normal, she could appreciate how people could
mistake that
for being appropriate. Mm-hmm. And I agree with that. That's why I think it's so important to understand where people come from before you jump down their throats. Like, I've seen the images of Scarlett doing blackface, but I didn't watch the videos, so I can't say what she was doing. It looks sus because she's painted dark and then she's holding a puppet that's a black puppet with curly hair and she's wearing a curly haired wig. So I don't know under what circumstances I would think it was appropriate, but I don't know what she did, so I can't say, like, cancel her. Mm-hmm. But anyway, moving on. You watched... which I don't even know, are you allowed to even talk about Lisey's story?
Lisey.
Lisey, sorry.
I know, it's so...
Lisey's story is a Stephen King adapted.
Stefan King, as Jamie Foxx in SNL says. Yes, well, it's unspooling, I think July 16th or something is the last. It's an 8-episode series based on the Stephen King novel, directed by Pablo Larraín. Reviews have been out because I believe press has been able to speak about, as of May 25th, the first several episodes at least.
You watched all of them.
I watched all of them.
I watched portions of a few episodes.
Yeah. I have to say, it is beautifully shot, but it is beautifully shot trash. Love the ladies, Pablo Larraín, of course, is a notable director who's I'm always going to be interested in at this point. But, Julianne Moore, come on. But seeing her as in a trio of sisterhood with Joan Allen and Jennifer Jason Leigh, both of who have also done previous Stephen King adaptations, I liked a lot of scenes with them. But it's very... all of the elements, all of Stephen King's worst elements, I think, are there. Like disappearing into. She's married to Clive Owen, as this author who's shot and killed, and she's learned to disappear into his fantasy land world, basically, which is what he created after being the child of extreme trauma, and there's some other supernatural elements there, and it's called Booyah Moon. And every time they said that, I just couldn't. So yes, Lisey's story, even the name, and I remember I had that book, and I started it, and then I think I read the first chapter and just never finished it. For something, and you have to see there's such extreme violence against women in it, like Dane DeHaan, who is. There's the scene. I think you saw the scene where Julianne Moore just gets beat down.
Yeah,
and it's hard to watch. And I get Stephen King often has a lot of novels that are dealing with violence against women in ways that are rough, but also have a point. Like Rose Madder, I think, was one of my favorites as a kid that has never been made into a film. But this just wasn't it. Even as much as I love how it was shot by, I think, is it Darius Kanji? Yeah. So if you're a fan of anybody in it, of course, watch it. But otherwise, oh God, it could have been a 90-minute movie to me. A 120-minute movie. An 8-hour series? No.
Well, there you have it. Okay, there's a TV show called The Wire that...
Oh, is there?
There is, for those who don't know. But I know about it because so many people over the years have, raved about this show. Mm-hmm. And you finally decided to put it on. It ran from 2002 to 2008 on HBO.
I think 60 episodes?
Yes, there are 60 episodes. And it's always been on my radar.
Yeah.
And it has a predominantly black cast. So that was always, that always piqued my interest. But at the time I didn't have HBO, and I don't know that access to the show up until recently was easily available.
Unless you bought the disc set.
Right. So, we have access to HBO Max. So we watched the first episode. You watched more than one episode, right?
No, I just watched one.
Oh, so what did you think?
It's interesting, in retrospect, I think you come to expect a lot from the first episode of a series with the reputation this has. And it starts off kind of on a slow note. It's you kind of slowly sink into it, but by the end of the episode, I liked it. So I am very much interested in continuing.
It didn't grab my attention the way I wanted it to, but I think, like you said, all of the... I had a lot of expectations, that I'd be blown away, and the first episode's pretty sleepy to me, but I am interested in continuing. You can go on without me, and I'll pop in whenever you're watching it, so don't let me stop you. But to talk about a series that did grab my attention...
And mine.
The Mare of Easttown?
Not
just Mare of Easttown. I heard some people talk about it, and I had no idea what they were talking about. And you had mentioned it once, I think, prior. And then we had a free, what was it, a Monday or...
I don't remember. I think we were waiting for access to a screener.
Yeah, we were. Yes, that's right. We were going to watch a screener. That access was getting janky, so we put on Mare of Easttown, and when I tell you that shit is so good, and I don't have any thoughts about Kate Winslet, like good or bad, but she is so good. The story is like my kind of story, like full of shit and drama and.
Well, kind of like that first season of True Detective.
Yes, yeah, but talk about Mare of Easttown.
Well, I do like Kate Winslet, who will be starring opposite Sigourney Weaver in Avatar 2.
I didn't know that.
You didn't? I know I've talked about that.
No, well, I mean, of course I know Sigourney Weaver is in it, but I didn't know Kate Winslet was in it.
Yeah, the reunion of the James Cameron ladies. Yes, and I think that it had been on my radar reading all these articles about how she tackled this very difficult accent. But yeah, just very well done character work. It's directed by Craig Zobel, who has not done anything that I've seen that I didn't like. I loved Compliance. That was one of the best films that year. Z for Zachariah. The Hunt from last year.
Oh, that's Craig Zobel?
That's Craig Zobel,
oh,
yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, no, so I think he's a very intense, interesting director that has usually a lot of great roles for women. And Kate Winslet, I think it's one of the best things she's done. It's a very meaty role. I like all the supporting characters. I like Evan Peters. I like Jean Smart.
Yes, her accent, very strong, because she has a British accent, naturally, correct? Right. And then her look, I really like that she looks normal. Like, she looks like she's probably like a size 12, 14. She looks like she doesn't have a bunch of shit injected into her face. Her hair, I'm having a difficult time clocking if it's a wig, which is a really good sign, but it looks like she has like roots that are grown out for a year, which is in line with what her character's going through. I think we should wait until we finish the last episode. So there are 7 episodes?
Yeah, which the last one is today, I think.
We watched 6 episodes, we watched 4 in one night and then 2 the next night, and then tonight will be the final episode. So I think maybe next week we can do like a recap.
Okay, sure.
On the podcast, probably not video, but yeah, this shit was riveting, and I cannot wait to find out what we have in store in the last final episode. But moving on, what is Bones and All?
Oh, so we're at the section of new projects that are being filmed.
Oh yes, the section of new projects. Go ahead.
The section of new projects, anointed. This actually isn't news. Partially, Luca Guadagnino is finally starting his next project, Bones and All, based on a novel by David Kajganich, who wrote the screenplays for A Bigger Splash, which is, of course, a remake of La Piscine, and Suspiria, which is, of course, a remake, both for Guadagnino. But I think what's interesting is it's just started filming, announced a whole passel of new cast members, because previously I only knew about Timothée Chalamet, who is reuniting, of course, after Call Me By Your Name with Luca Guadagnino, and it's about cannibalism, which I think is interesting and an extension of the Armie Hammer ongoing debacle. But Taylor Russell, I believe, is going to be the lead, who was my favorite in the movie Waves, which you saw with Kelvin Harrison.
Yes.
Chloe Sevigny and David Gordon Green, the director, are also starring in it. So, needless to say, I'm very excited for that film.
Okay, what is Poor Things?
Poor Things is the next project from Yorgos Lanthimos, who directed... I know I made you watch Dogtooth. I don't know if you've seen this Killing of a Sacred Deer, or The Favorite, or The Lobster.
I saw The Lobster.
Okay, so you know his brand of... came out of the Greek weird wave, as it were. He is reuniting with Emma Stone, who, after Cruella, I'm actually, she's not on my avoid list, I guess. He's adapting Poor Things, which is kind of a Frankenstein story based on a 1992 Scottish cult classic, also starring Mark Ruffalo and Willem Dafoe.
Okay. Is that it?
No, didn't you write... I gave you a bunch of things for your
No, I mean,
agenda.
Are you done talking about Poor Things?
Yes.
Okay, I don't want to cut you off, as I'm apt to do. What is Brother and Sister?
Oh, so Arnaud Desplechin has been very busy. Obviously notable French director. Cannes will be announcing their official selection June 3rd, finally. And he adapted a Philip Roth novel called Deception, which I actually I started reading several years back and never finished, so I aim to, hopefully over the next week I'll probably read that. That is highly tipped to be a potential film program to Cannes this year, but he's already announced another project called Brother and Sister, starring Marion Cotillard and Melville Poupeau, who I also, both of those people I quite like, so it's exciting to me.
Okay, Le Jeune Imam.
Le Jeune Imam, Kim Chaperon's new project. You know Kim Chaperon, who directed Shaitan, starring Vincent Cassel. Mm-hmm. So kind of this director that came out of that, what did they call all those people then? The Splat Pack. He's kind of involved in that, but has graduated to other things and is related to the, I forget who he's related to, the Gavris clan. Anyway, that is a project I'm interested in.
And lastly, Great Freedom.
Great Freedom. It's the sophomore film by an Austrian director named Sebastian Mies. Notably, it stars Franz Rogowski, who I feel like you've seen in things, but you're going to see him this week in Undine, which I'll be rewatching, but you'll be seeing for the first time, which a Christian Petzold film I really like. And this project, Great Freedom, is about a man that survives the concentration camps only to directly be escorted to prison due to paragraph 175 because he's a homosexual. So that the period and the subject matter, of course, I think should be interesting. Plus, I think Rogowski's a fantastic actor.
All right, so moving on to movies we watched this past week that we didn't review on the YouTube channel. Mm-hmm. Waiting for You?
I watched that. Well, so I watched two Fanny Ardant films I haven't seen before.
Okay.
And I guess we'll just put a pin in why. But yeah, I watched a film called Waiting for You she did in 2017. And Sabrina, which she has a very small role in that. My mother never liked Julia Ormond. I don't know if it's because she was upset at Legends of the Fall or what. But for some reason, my mother did not like Julia Ormond. So when her heyday was kind of, in that mid-90s period, and she did a remake of Sabrina, of course, the Audrey Hepburn classic, and I'd never seen it. Sidney Pollack directed it. The scenes in France, Fanny's beautiful. I think Valérie Lemercier has a small part in there as well. But as soon as they get back and we're stuck with Julia Ormond and her makeover and falling in love with Greg Kinnear and then Harrison Ford, yeah.
Oh.
It was unpleasant and dull, and I can see why that film is probably not as obviously beloved as Humphrey Bogart and Audrey.
You finally watched Ray.
Yeah, there's a reason though. First we watched Leprechaun 5 in the Hood, and I was looking up, because every time I see Warwick Davis, who plays Leprechaun, and Willow, I'm like, God, what else did he do? He had to do, and I saw Ray in his filmography, and I'm like, well, we need to watch something quality after Leprechaun 5 in the Hood, so...
You didn't like Leprechaun 5?
It was a chore to get through. I do like iced tea, but that was a chore. It's
obviously so stupid,
yeah.
But it's also, I don't think I mean, I should know this, but I think I had forgotten that the leprechaun speaks in rhymes. Mm-hmm. So, hearing the leprechaun rhyme, like, inappropriate...
Yeah, because he riffs on fucking I Have a Dream.
Yeah, he makes sort of, like, inappropriate, definitely not PC comments, and then he rhymes them. So, yeah, it was worth watching for that. So stupid. But what did you think of Jamie Foxx and Ray?
Oh, excellent. Really good. I mean, I don't know why I never saw... I mean, I was in college when that came out, and I think biopics are never my go-to anyway, and of course I wasn't watching films at the level I do now. It's just something like a lot of films, like, oh, this doesn't sound like fun.
Ray Charles is an interesting figure because oftentimes we'll say, if it's a huge figure like like an Elvis or an MLK or even when they do Stevie Wonder's biopic or Michael Jackson's, their careers and their lives are so big that you have to just take like a moment, right? And then there are people like a Ray Charles who I think his popularity is not as big. So it's not like taking a moment would have made sense. I think a 2.5 hour movie makes sense for someone like Ray Charles. So I think that was the best way to do it. It does feel a little tedious at times.
Sure, but I always appreciate a film that doles out a lot of great moments for women, because you got Kerry Washington and Aunjanue Ellis and Regina King. And the woman who plays his mother, who never really did anything else.
But Jamie Foxx does such a good job as Ray Charles. So it's just worth it to see him perform at such a high level.
It's directed by Taylor Hackford, and it's interesting to read that Hackford had the rights to Ray Charles' story since '87, and had, nobody wanted to produce this film, which, in retrospect, is so strange to me. And that was the year Jamie Foxx was double nominated for an Oscar, between that and Collateral, and it is a well enough done biopic. It just gets to the point where he kicks his heroin addiction, and then you get the montage of and then he did all these other albums and went on to blah blah blah.
Right. You watched something called She?
Oh yes, I wanted to read the synopsis to tell you why this immediately drew me in. In a dystopian world, male shoes dominate, and the females, high heels with spindly vines, are kept strictly for breeding purposes. Under disguise, a female breaks loose and attempts to move beyond her confines. Her attempt alters not only her fate, but the very fabric of society.
Sounds like Handmaid's Tale?
but told with shoes, and it's...
literally shoes.
And it's stop-motion animation.
Oh.
It's directed, first-time director Zhu Shangwei, and it's very Jan Svankmajer. If you are familiar with any of that stop-motion, it reminded me in the best ways of something like Little Otik, aka Greedy Guts, and very subversive in the weird traditions that he builds in this world of shoes. That's kind of nonsensical. Even early David Lynch, maybe a little bit, who I know had some shorts that were animation, if not stop motion. Fascinating. It definitely is kind of the makings of a cult classic, and it came out in 2018, and it right now is streaming on Mubi, which is why I knew about it. But on Mubi, I think things are only available for 30 days. But yeah, fascinating.
We watched something called Grizzly. Mm-hmm. Which was released by who?
Severin Films.
It was interesting. It's like if Jaws were a grizzly bear.
Oh, it's very much a Jaws ripoff. It's 1976. Christopher George, the lead.
Who was in Playgirl.
Yes.
So if you want to see his dingle dangle, just Google that.
Which apparently that shoot, he was eating watermelon.
Yeah, the photo I saw of him, he's naked and sort of spread eagle, but on his side, and just eating a big slice of watermelon with a spoon.
Yeah, it's interesting what they thought was sexy back then. But he kind of has that Lee Marvin, James Coburn kind of grizzled masculinity, and I just kept laughing because they make it seem like they're at somewhere in the city, because it's the park owner where this 15-foot grizzly is, slaughtering people. And he keeps saying, because he's the park supervisor.
He's like the park ranger.
He's the park ranger. This is my jurisdiction.
Yeah. I was most disappointed in the practical effects of the grizzly bear attacking. Like, the actual attacks are comical.
Oh, yeah, because it's all edited.
Because it's all edited, and we only see what looks like just a big furry arm with claws attacking things, but then we have stock footage of a grizzly bear walking around.
It's it made me want to rewatch Herzog's Grizzly Man, as well as Grizzly 2: The Revenge.
So I would recommend. I don't recommend watching Grizzly, but I do recommend watching the trailer for Grizzly 2, which has George Clooney,
Laura Dern, Louise Fletcher,
and Charlie Sheen,
which was filmed in the early 80s and came out last year. But the director of this, William Girdler, also directed a direct sequel to Grizzly called Day of the Animals, which Severin Films also put out, and we haven't watched yet. William Girdler, I find to be interesting. Not only did he direct the blaxploitation remake of The Exorcist, which we've seen, called Abby.
Oh, yes. Now I do recall.
And starring, what's her name?
We rented that from Cinephile.
We rented Black Devil Doll from Hell from Cinephile.
Oh.
I used to own Abby. I think I thought it was... It needs to be restored because it's just... It's hard to watch in its current form. But it stars, what's her name from Imitation of Life? Juanita... what's her name? And the guy from William Marshall from Blackula, and Juanita Moore. Anyhow, William Girdler also directed a film called The Manitou, which I would not recommend watching unless you have some kind of mind-altering substance. But Susan Strasberg plays a woman afflicted with a demon growing out of her neck like a goiter. And I invite you to watch the trailer for it, which
For the Klansman.
For the Manitou.
I thought we were talking about the Klansman.
No, I'm still talking about William Girdler.
Oh, okay. Go ahead.
The trailer for the Manitou, where Tony Curtis is like, has that reaction, like, in the neck? It's a demon in the neck? Anyhow.
Well, let's move on to the Klansman.
Which I watched last, which is a film that I've always wanted to see, but again, subject matter and despite the horrible reputation that precedes it, just never seemed a prime moment. But I watched it last night. Notably, O.J. Simpson and Lola Falana in the supporting cast, who are fascinating to see. Especially Lola Falana, who is actually giving a performance. Unlike Lady Coco is, blaxploitation gold. But, this is actually playing a sympathetic character. Not unlike she did in Liberation of L.B. Jones as well. But it's infamous. Samuel Fuller had written the script and was supposed to direct, and the studio got nervous about the subject matter. So they basically had the script rewritten. Sam Fuller, who is an excellent director, left. Terrence Young directed, and it's shocking because Terrence Young directed three, if not more, James Bond films starring Sean Connery in the 60s. He did a great film called Cold Sweat that I love with Charles Bronson, which maybe is on the B-side, but I still think is an excellent film. And it's shocking the quality of The Klansman, which needs to be restored. But the leads, Lee Marvin and Richard Burton, were just drunk the whole time. And most of Richard Burton's scenes have to be on his back or sitting, and he's visibly slurring. But the best scene that you have to see is the fisticuffs between Richard Burton and Cameron Mitchell. And Richard Burton is clearly drunk. Like, can almost barely stand and is throwing punches at Cameron Mitchell, whose body is flying all over the place. And this woman kisses him afterwards. And the line, he just slurring. It is fantastically, oh my God. Definitely worth a watch, though.
All right, moving on. You want to run down your top 5 releases for May, the month of May.
Well, we're at the end of the month, and I think we're trying to make it a tradition that films you might have missed over the past month that are worth watching.
All right.
In no particular order, but what stands out to me, Wrath of Man.
Okay, with Jason Statham.
The Guy Ritchie film. Sequin in a Blue Room.
The homosexual film.
Yeah. The Perfect Candidate.
Don't know that one.
Saudi Arabia.
Okay.
Quiet Place 2.
Yes.
And maybe just because this whole pandemic has made me grow soft, or maybe just because May, you were shit, May. Cruella.
Cruella's worth watching.
Yeah,
it's probably the biggest release of.
Well, I think Quiet Place 2 is kicking its ass at the box office. Not that
yeah, it is.
Not that I care about that, but.
But yeah, no, that's a reasonable selection. Today's May 30th. So it is Remy Ma's birthday. The rapper.
Yeah, no Remy Ma. Okay.
It's CeeLo's birthday.
Oh, poor CeeLo.
He's only 47.
Well, he's never quite recovered from
His sexual abuse allegations. And Winona Judd is only 57.
Well, she's...
Anyway. Okay, today's topic is death. I thought birthdays were an appropriate segue to death.
Just a very... Yes, which Joseph has chosen. A very ambivalent, nebulous conversation on death.
Well, what prompted it was a friend relayed a story about someone at his job dying and sort of how that affected the day. And for some reason, that story, I would say, bothered me.
Well, I think...
And I don't want to give all the details, but it was a gentleman was struck by a car and killed. And then our friend had the occasion to meet the wife, who was asking, like, has anyone seen her husband? And then everything that transpired.
And the couple was on vacation together.
And they were on holiday.
And the man was returning his car.
And I just thought, like, I don't know, it just bothered me more than stories like that normally would. I think just the...
Well, I think there are several things that, because everybody else around that life is just going on, and for this couple, because I think it's a situation that's so striking, because you can imagine ourselves.
I think, I was, selfishly sort of thinking of myself in that situation. But, so that prompted the topic, and my initial thought was, what are some films that stick out as markers for, like, our impressions of death or things that made an impact on our understanding of death? So just to start the conversation, I wanted to go there. So I made a list that include films you also mentioned, so I'll just go through them. Bambi.
Oh, yeah. Disney. Yeah. I remember my mother refusing to watch Disney films with me.
I remember watching, my parents taking us to a theater, and we watched Bambi, and I recall being very upset when the mom was...
Yeah, it's sad.
Yeah. Honey, I Shrunk the Kids.
That's me. So my mother brought me to that, and that was 89, I think. So. I was 5. And I could not get over that aunt dying. Like, I was upset.
It is sad because the aunt wanted to help.
This creature, I think, since you brought up this topic, and I was thinking of that film in particular, and probably how that affected and informed, going forward with relationships and...
The aunt from Honey, I Shrunk.
Well,
Is that why I'm in this situation now?
No, like, there are many things. But thinking about... I always was drawn to feeling such emotion, I think, for these figures that would sacrifice themselves, and I think that was kind of a first, like, I don't know if that's what moved me as a 5-year-old, but I didn't have a habit as a kid of waking my mom or parents up in the middle of the night, because, I got the impression that would be not good. But I remember that night I felt I needed a lot of sucre I just could not, I was sobbing over this aunt. Like,
I have down Beaches. That film fucked me up. It really did. And my mom would watch it often. And I think it was me understanding that, like, I had developed a friendship with the Barbara Hershey character, like, as the audience, like, watching, because I feel like we're witnessing the Bette Midler character, or Bette Midler's character, and her relationship with her friend. So as the audience, we're also going through this friendship. And what did I know as a kid about these two adult women and their lifelong friendship? But I felt very connected to the Barbara Hershey character. So, and then what's funny is her death is imminent. Like, she's sick, so we know she's going to pass. And every time, it would just tear me up.
What's funny is I didn't watch that film until I started dating you.
Really?
Yeah, we watched it. That was back when you would rent discs from Netflix. So we probably watched that back in 2008. And the first time I'd seen it. And I don't know why. Because that would have it sounds like something I would have watched with my mother, but...
Next we have, I Don't Know, Come and See.
Oh, God. Well, Criterion put it out, and I had aimed for us to review it, because they restored it and put out a Blu-ray last year. but we just never did. Again, a war film that's definitely hard to sit through, but one of the best of its kind ever made, Elam Klimov. But there's a scene where this child, because you're following this child, and through, I don't remember the time span, but not enough. His face suddenly becomes like that of an old man as the film goes along, but everything else stays the same. But there's a scene, I think he's looking for everybody in his village, and he can't find anybody, and he starts running, and he starts like running, I think, into this field, and he turns around and looks behind this barn, and all he sees are a sea of bodies stacked up against the barn. And I remember finding that so chilling and kind of unforgettable, just because you aren't expecting it, for one, and just you become invested by that time in the film with this child, and you know that things are happening. But to see it like that is, I don't know, like that's a scene I'll never forget in my mind's eye.
I have down Faces of Death.
I wrote down Faces of Death too. I never have seen a Faces of Death film, but when I was in grade school, that was what all the kids were trying to sneak watch.
So when I was in 10th grade, so there's Faces of Death 2, and then there's another video similar, and my friend had a babysitter who was of age to rent it, and we convinced her to rent them for us. So we spent an evening watching them. And they're just sequences of like, you see like open heart surgery, you see like sex reassignment surgery, you see cannibalism, you see people getting their penises chopped off, and electrocutions, and really bad car accidents. And I recall there being like a boxing match where someone gets knocked out and ultimately dies from the injuries. And it was I think the fascination with those videos really affected me, because there was so much build up, like, oh, one day we're going to watch this video. Mm-hmm. And it was disturbing. I recall, like, I distinctly recall me sitting in a bedroom, like, watching it, just being sort of like stuck over what I was seeing. But yeah, that was a big one. It's a Sin, which is the HBO Max series, about the group of young people in the UK in the late 80s, early 90s, affected by AIDS and HIV and AIDS. Yeah, that hit me harder than I thought it would.
More than like Angels in America?
Well, Angels in America is my next one.
Okay.
Not harder than that, but I think just because, like, like the fear of dying from AIDS has all but been eliminated in the past like decade. So that, like, I don't,
in the U.S. at least.
In the U.S., yes. But I think, and then we're not seeing that many stories, right? So a lot of gay films don't necessarily, like, that's not a plot point generally, like they were in the late 90s, early 2000s.
Well, it's kind of all there were for a while.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think it was the first time in a while I watched something, and it's a series. It's either 5 or 6 episodes. I can't recall, but we get to know these characters, and yeah, I mean, emotional. I wasn't crying, but it definitely.
I think I did a couple times during that.
But it was definitely hard to watch these characters meet their demise. Mm-hmm. But then moving on to Angels in America, because that was 2003.
Yeah, my freshman year, yeah.
And I recall renting that. I was still living in Las Vegas, and I rented it and watched it by myself one weekend, and just, like being really struck by these characters. And
I remember the hype about it, and obviously it was on Broadway, which I didn't have access to as a young Minnesotan, but I read the play before seeing the HBO special, which I now own on Blu-ray. But yeah,
I've never seen Sophie's Choice.
It's, for all my ragging on Meryl and how she's overrated, Sophie's Choice is pretty good. But the scene where she makes her choice is.
What is her choice?
She's allowed to save one of her children by a member of some Nazi. The child she chooses, she gets to keep. The other gets carted off to the gas chamber.
And which one does she choose?
The one that's in her arms, which I think is her girl. So I think they take the little boy.
Oh God!
And just the screams, and it's very well done. It's a very well done film, and that's Alan J. Pakula, who you've seen Clute.
Yes.
And a really good film with Liza Minnelli. Oh, The Sterile Cuckoo. But he's done a lot of films, but Sophie's Choice is definitely one of those. Even her casting, I think, is an interesting story because they wanted a Polish woman, but all the women they had, the issue they had was getting a woman who could also speak English. And Streep is one of those performers who's known as for her
chameleon.
Her accent work,
okay.
I think, goes a long way. But yeah, Sophie's Choice definitely scarred me as a child.
Okay, so then moving on to general topics, I guess. Do you want to talk about, just talking about death, like do you want to talk about AIDS?
Yeah, sure.
HIV/AIDS.
I think, well, it's interesting because we're both of a generation that grew up to be afraid of sex. And then the advent of PrEP, Truvada, etc., and also other HIV prophylaxis measures. It's weird to even think, when did we start taking that even? Like 2013, 2014?
Sure.
And even sharing that information, the rollout was kind of stymied because even requesting it through our...
Well, I think you should start by explaining. So, PrEP is an acronym for pre-exposure prophylaxis, and the drug that's used is called Truvada. Truvada is an antiretroviral medication that, if taken daily, can prevent someone who is HIV negative from contracting HIV.
Right.
So it's essentially it's kind of like a vaccine against HIV.
Right.
And I don't think a lot of people know, because oftentimes, like when I'm talking to, like especially at work, I've mentioned to some people and they have no idea what it is.
I think heterosexuals know, but even in the gay scene, when we first started taking it, and the reaction to people that, the first wave of people taking it was kind of like, oh, you're sluts.
Sure, but what I was trying to explain is there is a medication that can prevent someone from getting HIV, which is pretty major if we're talking about death. When you think that there was an entire population of gay men who were wiped out from HIV and AIDS, and then there are, I would say, 2 generations post who lived in extreme fear of getting HIV, and then you have current generation that has no thought of
no conception of it.
No conception of being afraid.
Yeah.
So it's a very interesting trajectory because it's only been 35 years that we went from this just deathly 10-year window to
a plague.
Seeing a very deathly plague, to seeing effective treatments, to then seeing it's not eradicated, but it's managed very well, and then there is a high level of prevention. So there's a lot of trauma associated with that from from the people, people who were born maybe 10 years prior to myself, who had to live through that, So if you were in your, late teens, early 20s, in the early 80s, I mean, you were the prime demographic for being hit. And the trauma that the people who lived through that and are still alive here with us today, the trauma they experienced, versus someone who's my age, who just spent all of my teens and 20s just thinking I was going to die from AIDS, so I was so afraid of everything. I think that it's such a weird thing to then have that thing, that monkey, removed from your back.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then it's oh, okay, well...
Not unlike kind of right now with this pandemic, with COVID-19 and the vaccine, of just, the trauma of the past year, and being it could just kind of be manageable.
That's a good point, because the trauma, trauma. But yeah, the trauma I feel from the past year and some months is pretty significant. And then when I think the trauma I felt from being afraid of HIV/AIDS, magnify that 10 times. And that's how I was operating in my early 20s. Like, just everything I did was like, well, this could be the thing that kills me. And
Oh yeah, my freshman year in college, I was at Planned Parenthood every other weekend, lying through my teeth, assuring that I had been exposed to something so I could get medication, because in my head I was convinced I had.
so this is a good segue into desensitization, because I think like seeing so much death and being aware of it, especially in film, like it's funny how we can watch, you know, I love horror. I can enjoy a good slasher flick. And just being able to witness those acts and not feel anything, it's just like, oh, 10 people were killed in this film, like whatever.
Well, because it's funny, because desensitization is ostensibly that is a mechanism that is happening internally, right? Because we can't possibly take on all of the actual processing of witnessing all this carnage, right?
Right.
Like it's a mental health thing that we kind of do for ourselves. So when you first brought up this topic, I was trying to think of, you know, desensitization and how to get over it. Really, you know, it kind of goes back to moderate everything in moderation, because you can become desensitized to everything, but if you take a step back and aren't overly exposed to it, suddenly something that had no... Because I often say this, right? Like, I've watched a film at a film festival, and then I rewatched it a year later, and my reaction to it is different, because I'm not kind of desensitized to the visual stimulus of a film festival. And you're actually able to kind of intimately approach something as it should be in the first place.
I think, yeah, for me, it's more about, like, in film, if characters seem real and if we have a relationship with them,
right,
then seeing them die or being hurt has more impact than just like, oh, you know, some zombies slaughter 100 random people in a scene. It's like, well, these people aren't like real people.
Right.
So I think that's the difference. I don't, you know, desensitization also implies that, you know, I cannot understand or see the value in life or death. And that's not the case. I just think it's an interesting phenomenon that as the days go by, the things that we're allowed to view on television, and particularly violence and death, is considered more acceptable than sex.
In this country, yes.
In adult themes in this
Europe,
country.
In Europe, no.
So it's so funny that, like, you know, seeing two women be intimate is considered more vulgar or explicit than watching, you know, 100 people be slaughtered by some villain in a Marvel movie.
But if there's no blood, it's PG-13.
But then if a woman were to talk about her menstrual cycle and you saw like a bloody sanitary napkin, that would definitely get an R rating.
Or if you watch her get pleasure from cunnilingus, it'd be NC-17.
Right. So, very curious. We don't have a ton of time left. I was going to mention, I have a tattoo that says "Do not resuscitate," and when people see that, they always ask, like, people want to, like, they want me to explain, like they have a right to know. But my usual response is that I always say I've lived long enough. But I think part of my thought is, well, there are two reasons. When I think about this tattoo, and I was not close to my grandmother. Like, on my mother's side, that grandmother is the only grandmother I really knew. And I wasn't close to her. I did grow up with her, but there was somewhat of a language barrier, and my mom's relationship with her was not the best, so that influenced my thoughts on her. Regardless, she ended up having a stroke and was bedridden for like 6 years. So I watched this lady lay in a hospital bed in her home for 6 years, staring at the ceiling. She was conscious. She had an awareness of what was going on. She would react, but she was just stuck in this bed for years. And I always think about that, like that would be my nightmare. And I know people often react like, well, you know, that means if you were to slip in a pool and need to be mouth to mouth, that you're saying you don't want that. Yeah, I would rather take that risk. Like, you know, I would rather risk that, you know, sort of like, well, I guess he's going to die with something so minor, over like, I don't want to be stuck in a bed staring at a ceiling for years. So I think that's part of it. And also, my thoughts about death are the same as like I don't believe in like an afterlife. I think when I die, it's going to be the same as like before I was born, like nothing. So if it's nothing, then, you know, what does it matter how long I live? and I know I'm known for being very morbid, but I don't necessarily, I'm not saying I want to die. I'm just saying that death sounds very peaceful and like, you know, like, do I look forward to being dead? I mean, to me, death is not scary. It just seems very peaceful. Like it's just the ultimate peace. So I don't think it's something to be afraid of for me. But then that moves me into the topic of suicide. So what are our thoughts on suicide? Oh, before I go there, what do you think about my DNR tattoo?
It doesn't. Well, I'm also kind of a morbid person as well. But I always think it's to each his own. You should have control of your own body,
as the Bible says. The Bible doesn't say that.
No, it's everything regarding your body should be your choice.
Oh,
That goes for everybody.
funny you say that. Okay.
Oh, okay.
But anyway, well then, move on to suicide. What are our thoughts?
As in good, bad,
Well, just
hot or not?
I mean, just when you toot it or boot it.
Again, I think, everybody always says that suicide is such a selfish act, and sure, but you don't know anybody's particular situation, and even if you do, even if you are the intimate of that person, like, I don't know. Like, it's not something I feel like I can say anything about other than that. It's obviously that should be a personal decision.
I think, I don't know the pain some people go through and what someone must have gone through to get to the point where they say, I'm going to end my life. So to then tell someone like, it's not worth it, it gets better, is like, but you don't know what people have gone through. Some people want to kill themselves because their parents found out they charged their credit card $3,000 for some Gucci boots. That's not the same as someone who spent a life being abused and, we don't know what people go through. I do think that
but suicide attempts are usually a cry for help, right? And,
sure.
And of course, I think there's a whole protocol that should be followed, especially for teenagers. Because, when I was 13, I tried to kill myself. And thinking back on that 13-year-old, it's like, well, I'm a completely different person now.
Sure.
But what did I, weighing realistically, did I really want to die, or was I just really feeling like I was in a terrible situation and there was no way out? And it really was that, which is why I didn't have to sit on the psych ward, and because I think that those who I was in contact with were able to deduce that. But I just think, but the resulting ripple effect, even from a suicide attempt, is an outpouring of sympathy, and which I felt very embarrassed and ashamed at, because it's like everybody knows my business. I'm in a small town, and I didn't want that. But I think that having lived through something like that, you're privy to everybody's opinions about it, and all I know is, as that 13-year-old, I didn't want to know any of those opinions.
Yeah, I've had suicidal ideations. I've never had a plan, nor have I attempted, but I think, for as morbid as I am and as good as death sounds, I will say the thing that keeps me from killing myself is that I don't want to, I think about how hurt some people would be, and that, and I know that may not be the best reason.
No, not really.
But just being honest, I think like, well, I've never seriously been close to doing it, because I thought, well, certain people in my life would be hurt, and
I think people listening to this will think that, that is sure, that is I'm glad that you have that, but there should probably be some padding in there, some other reasons for wanting to do it.
Well, but if I'm being authentic about how I feel about death, to me it's like, if I die today, 20 years from now, 40 years from now, it makes no difference. I won't know the difference. My life won't have any more impact than it did. I I think that I should live my life and try to do the best I can to be happy and do the best to be a productive member of our society. But I don't think it matters if... Okay, that ended abruptly. We ran over on time. But you wanted to finish your thought.
Oh, what I was saying was, I think that, this isn't just something, it sounds like lip service, but, practicing positivity is really something you have to train yourself to do. Because I think prior to us being together, I had a reputation for sounding a lot more like you do, but I think I quickly realized that if both of us constantly had that attitude, we'd be on a sinking ship. So I equated that to, since I'll never be a parent, the only way I will have to experience that kind of selfless kind of love where you really are putting someone else first. And it really started me on a path of not self-enlightenment per se, but having to realize that you have to look at the positive. You can steer your boat to the positive, and sometimes you kind of meet yourself in the middle, and that's okay. But it really is just putting in the work of, what you put out in the universe comes back to you. I think. I'm not innately a spiritual person, but I think the energy, the vibe you put out there, I think is important, because if you're a sour ass person and that's what you're putting out there, that's the energy you're going to receive in response. But if when people talk about having the glow and the glow inside you, I really think it's just being comfortable in your space wherever you are moving about in the world.
Okay. Well, that's a good note to end on. However, you do have an interesting list of films to share.
Yes, which probably should have been injected somewhere else earlier, but films that will help you on your own path towards desensitization.
Okay, here we go.
Necromantic.
A little necrophilia,
yes.
Yes.
These are films that I think at a certain age, you seek out wanting to shock yourself and then end up kind of being like, oh, they're just disgusting. Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer.
Okay.
Angst, another, I think, is it Cargill is that guy's last name? I think it's Austrian. Gaspar Noé is a big fan of this film, but also disturbing. And Man Bites Dog, another very realistic, uncomfortable serial killer film.
All right. Well, how would you like to end?
In the words of Leonard Cohen, as sung by Roberta Flack, hey, that's no way to say goodbye.
Toodaloo.